When the player broke into my civilization simulator. Civilization in the Box+Unique God+Summoning Player+Creation. After winning 1 million yuan, Li Fei returned to his hometown and started a rural life. In his sleep, he was awakened by two miniature figures, and he discovered that there was actually a sandbox at home that could cultivate civilization. When he puts any combination of materials into it. Soil plus leaves, plus. Chapter 1. Adventures at Home. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Come on, Li Fei, sit down and talk about why you're resigning. I'm going back to my hometown. Oh. It's like this, living here is too hard. You've also been working in the company for 3 or 4 years. If you have any difficulties, you can tell me. Regarding the salary issue, I can also help you talk to the boss and raise it appropriately. It's not that difficult. I just won 1 million and I don't know how to spend it. Is this considered difficult? 1 month later. Li Fei opened the courtyard door with a brand new key and finally returned to his long-lost hometown. The 3 bungalows that caught the eye were clean and tidy, with walls repainted inside and outside. Most of the old furniture was replaced with new ones, and there were all kinds of household appliances and kitchenware, and even a batch of new agricultural tools were prepared. The weeds in the yard have been cleaned up, new stone bricks have been laid on the ground, and a flat small vegetable field has been left. This small world has returned to the bright and warm appearance that Li Fei remembered. If nothing unexpected happens, he will spend most of his future life here. Li Fei, 27 years old this year, was also a young man with ideals and aspirations. He didn't have outstanding academic performance since childhood, but he was able to make a decent living. With a bit of luck, he successfully completed his undergraduate and graduate studies, and after graduation, he went to a small and medium-sized company to live a stable social life. He also planned to continue to roll up in the big city and among his peers, seeking a brighter future. But a few years ago, after his parents passed away in an accident, he suddenly lost the motivation to continue living like this. He found that most of his so-called ideals and aspirations were actually derived from his parents and family, and from the values and standards of society. He may essentially be a person who enjoys comfort. Is it really worth working so hard now that one person is full and the whole family is not hungry? In recent years, he often dreams of childhood, dreaming of scenes where he grew up with his family and lived in a small courtyard. Every year when he goes home to sweep the grave, he comes here to take a look. Through the courtyard door, as he watched the weeds grow taller and taller year by year, his desire to return to a comfortable life grew stronger and stronger year by year. But with his pitiful savings, he won't have enough sources of income when he comes home, and life will definitely be very difficult. Until the day he got off work, he mistakenly bought a scratch sheet and won 1 million. Living in a big city for 1 million is not much, but if we go back to the countryside and plan reasonably, it will be enough for him to live for a long, long time. Li Fei felt that this might be fate, and his fate had guided him to spend his life in go home like that. So he resolutely proposed to resign and reserved a month for himself to take care of everything. After paying the tax on the bonus, there is still 800,000 yuan left, and 600,000 yuan is deposited in the bank for interest. The interest is not much, but it is enough for his basic living expenses in his hometown. With 200,000 left, I took out 100,000 yuan to renovate the dilapidated old house inside and outside, replacing it with trendy furniture and appliances. In addition to paying off a small debt owed by Li Fei before, the last 100,000 yuan was specifically used for food, drink, and entertainment. He bought a camera, changed his phone and computer, went to watch plays and exhibitions that he was reluctant to spend money on before, and had a good farewell with his best friends. It has been proven that Li Fei is indeed a person with low material desires. He didn't even spend half of his 100,000 yuan, and felt bored. He bought a comfortable high-speed rail business seat and went back to his hometown. Li Fei started a big cleaning as soon as he entered the house. Although he had already hired someone to clean it up before, he still had to tidy up the new and old items at home, trying to restore them to their childhood memories as much as possible. Busy until the sun set in the west, Li Fei turned on the stove and had a simple dinner before taking a hot shower. Although he felt a bit tired in his body, his mind gained unprecedented peace. A new life is about to begin. He lay in bed and saw the red glow coming out from behind the roof. His eyelids began to fight, and his vision gradually blurred. He slept peacefully. He didn't dream of his hometown again that night. When Li Fei was half asleep and half awake, he seemed to hear two chattering voices near his ears. Is he a god? This is so big. It must be a god. God. Please wake up. Speaking of which, God's eye droppings are so big, like the big rocks on the mountain before. 57. Don't blaspheme God. 42. Look at him. His eyes are about to open. Step back. Kneel down. Li Fei opened his eyes. In his hazy gaze, he saw two little people. Wait a minute. Two little people. Li Fei suspected that he had not woken up yet, so he raised his hand and rubbed his eyes, focusing his gaze on the pillow. There are indeed two little people kneeling on pillows, looking up at themselves. They were only about the height of their thumbnails, and because they were relatively close, Li Fei could barely see the faces of the two little people clearly. Two little people, a man and a woman. The woman was slightly older and looked in her early 20s. The man seemed to be still a half-year-old child, and their expressions were both solemn and fearful. Li Fei opened his mouth, wanting to say something, and swallowed it back. Because he suddenly realized that his first reaction was to want to communicate with two small people, and he was a bit abnormal. Just when he was confused, that little woman really spoke up. God. Please save our world. Ah. Li Fei was stunned. His brain was running at high speed in this moment, trying to rationalize the scene in front of him. The excuses used include but are not limited to my parents being reclusive super scientists who made great achievements for the country and the world when I was young. I retired early because I was tired of disputes, and then casually developed a few pocket robots to relieve my boredom. If that's the case, he needs to carefully examine his ingredients, at least by opening the back of his head to see if it's a bone or a gear exposed. After forcing himself to accept the current setting, Li Fei decided to listen to what the villain had to say before making any plans. Seeing that their gods didn't react much, the female villain took a deep breath, seemingly gathering great courage, and said, God. Thanks to your great power, our world was once incredibly prosperous. All space grids became one country, and entropy energy orbitals connected 256 space grids together. The world is in a state of lasting peace and prosperity. Until one day, the entropy energy of the world suddenly began to dissipate, and the space grids went out one after another, taking away the lives of people in the space grids. As the last space grid was about to go out, people collected the last bit of entropy energy and sent us out of the world through the book garden www.zhaoshuyuan.com, in order to find you and restart our world. Entropy energy, spatial lattice. Li Fei sounded like a science fiction novel with a doomsday theme, but the vivid characters in front of him made him feel that these may not be just nonsense. Where is your world now? Li Fei tried to ask, deliberately keeping his voice low for fear of shattering the eardrums of these two little people. It's right under your bed, suddenly shouted the boy who had been silent all along. He laughed and seemed to be pleased by the unexpected fooling of the gods. 57. You shut up, the female villain muttered in a low voice. Amidst the anxious expressions of the two little figures, Li Fei placed them on the desk by the bed and then rolled up the sheets and mattresses layer by layer. Finally, in the center of the bed board of this old wooden bed, Li Fei unexpectedly discovered a transparent sandbox. The sandbox was only slightly larger than the palm of his hand, and when Li Fei looked closer, it turned out to be a withered, yellow, and dilapidated miniature desert. At this point, a piece of text appeared on the sandbox. Civilization Simulator 1.0 Scale. 1 centimeter equals 1000 meters, click to adjust the scale, entropy energy. 0, status. There are no signs of life in the space grid, the evolution of the world has ended, waiting for the next restart, starting from creating the first creature, let the world restart. Click to view the creation manual, your world seems to be. Li Fei intended to tell the two little people that their world had been destroyed. Turning my head, I only saw an empty desktop. The new book has been submitted for signing, welcome to invest. Isn't Chapter 2 one knife, 990.9. You are listening at novelfull.audio. From what the little person just said, it can be inferred that this palm-sized civilization simulator should be the so-called spatial grid, and those two little people come from here. The panel on the civilization simulator shows that the entropy energy has reached 0, indicating that the spatial lattice has been extinguished. Those two little people were also residents of this spatial grid, perhaps disappearing with the extinguishing of the grid. Li Fei was shocked by everything that happened before him, and at the same time, he became curious about the panels on the civilization simulator. He reached out and clicked on the line displaying the proportion, expanding 1 centimeter equals 1000 meters, tenfold to 1 centimeter equals 100 meters. The sandbox, which was originally the size of a palm, began to rapidly expand and became a sandbox about 1 meter square. The desert scene in the sandbox is presented more vividly and meticulously in front of Li Fei. The traces of sand dunes wandering in the desert, as well as the small tornadoes twisting between heaven and earth, are all clearly distinguishable. Li Fei cautiously touched the surface of the sandbox, which was shimmering with light, without any sense of touch, as if he had only touched a light curtain. It wasn't until he had deep contact with the tornado over the desert that he felt the subtle touch of sand particles brushing against his fingertips. The tornado airflow, which was not much thicker than a straw, immediately deflated when it touched his finger and quickly dissipated on the ground. Li Fei took his hand out of the sandbox and touched it, feeling a chill. It was caused by the low temperature in the sandbox, completely different from the outside world, indicating that this is truly an independent small world, and I can also cross the boundary between the two worlds and have an impact on this small world, he pondered. Li Fei hesitated for a moment and changed the ratio to 1 centimeter equals 50 meters. This way, the sandbox will only be enlarged to 2 meters square, so as not to become 10 meters high and poke open the roof. But this time, the size of the sandbox did not change, but the scene inside the sandbox was enlarged. Li Fei had a sudden inspiration, scrolling on the surface of the sandbox like a mobile phone screen. Sure enough, the scene inside the sandbox began to scroll along, just like watching a 360-degree panoramic image on a phone. Then he tried to zoom in and out with his fingers. Sure enough, the scene of the sandbox world also zoomed in and out, and it was very smooth without any lag. This thing is too magical, Li Fei sighed. He was worried that there wouldn't be any entertainment activities in his hometown before, and over time it would become boring. Now he has some fun. So, he focused his gaze on the panel of Civilization Simulator 1.0, with the following written at the bottom. Starting from creating the first creature, let the world restart. Click to view the creation manual. Like opening a mobile app, Li Fei clicked on the Creation Handbook. Dear Deity, welcome to the Creator's Handbook for the Gods. Creating a life is not difficult, but what is difficult is creating an eternal and enduring civilization. As a novice god, you should remember this sentence now. Mix your favorite materials and put them into the civilization simulator to complete your first creation. There's nothing left below. The only 3 sentences in the manual of creation shocked Li Fei greatly. Before opening the creation manual, he wondered if there might be any obscure content inside. As a result, they went straight to Jian. No requirements, no restrictions, no instructions, just throw materials into the grid. Okay, since you dare to say that, I dare to believe it too. Li Fei took out a porcelain bowl from the kitchen as a container, put a small handful of soil from the vegetable field, scraped some rust residue, placed a withered leaf, and grabbed some sawdust into it. After a little stirring, Li Fei poured the material into the sandbox world. The materials crossed the interface between reality in the sandbox world, and in an instant, they changed into several clusters of light of different colors, falling like meteors on the desert. Before Li Fei could operate, the sandbox world automatically adjusted the scale to 1 centimeter equals 1 meter and located the location where the light cluster fell. Li Fei stared at that place. Suddenly, there was a movement under the sand. A yellow plant seedling emerged. The first creation was actually a plant, murmured Li Fei. This plant grows very fast, branching out in a few seconds, and finally growing leaves at the end of the branch. However, the color of that leaf looked even darker than the color of the desert. Li Fei reached out and enlarged his field of view, only to find that it was actually a rusted iron leaf. Is this the effect of integrating rust into it? Can such leaves undergo photosynthesis? Li Fei couldn't help but wonder. As he had expected, after a few seconds, the plant quickly withered and eventually turned into dust and returned to the desert. Dear deity, your creation 001 survived in the space grid for 34 seconds without generating civilization. 'Cause of death. Inability to photosynthesis, you have obtained 1 point of entropy energy, Li Fei looked at the entropy energy column in the panel, and the value behind it became 1. He was not surprised by the death of plants. After all, he did not expect to create a civilization that bloomed everywhere in one go. But the increase in entropy energy sparked his thinking. Li Fei tried to click there and a text box appeared. Entropy energy. A reward for divine creations. The emergence of creation creates waves in a uniform energy field, while the death of creation brings the energy field back to tranquility. This power that alters the energy field itself will eventually condense into entropy energy and return it to the gods, that is to say, even the exchange of matter between two worlds follows the law of conservation of energy. Li Fei speculates, putting materials into a civilization simulator to generate creations is actually stealing some energy from the real world, and finding the creation at www.jiaoyuan.com to die. This part of the energy will still be returned to the real world, but condensed into entropy energy. So what is the use of this entropy? The civilization simulator quickly answered Li Fei's doubts. A new text box appears. Is entropy energy used to summon forces outside the world? The more entropy energy is used, the stronger the summoned force will be, power beyond the world. Li Fei, who has always been calm and composed, couldn't help but rejoice when he saw these words, and the long-sealed soul of Zhonger couldn't help but jump. Originally, this civilization simulator can not only create artifacts, but also summon external forces. What will this power be? Will there be a replica of Superman placed in the civilization simulator? If it weren't for Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Sun Wukong, Zhu Beiji, and even Tang Monk would be fine. Even summoning a Bei to come in can greatly help him establish civilization. With anticipation in mind, Li Fei consumed 1 point of entropy energy and decided to summon it first to give it a try. A pure white meteor streaked across the desert sky. The meteor landed and stirred up 2 centimeters of dust in the sandbox. Li Fei focused on his perspective and saw a trembling figure standing up in the dust. *****. The figure suddenly cursed loudly. Isn't it 999 yuan? Is it so real? Outside the sandbox, Li Fei paused for a moment. That guy still has 2 lines of text on his head. ID, proud of the crowd and reckless young man, features. Fixed damage, large amount of money, extremely high explosion rate. The new book has been submitted for signing, welcome to invest. Chapter 3. Still a money ability player. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Quang Xiao is a netizen Qi Xiong met in the game. After graduating from Qixiong University, he returned to his hometown and worked in the county town. He worked as an equipment maintenance worker at a local state-owned dairy factory, alternating day and night shifts. He lived in a daze and didn't save much money for several years. I pieced together a house and had to spend money on decoration, making life increasingly difficult. In order to earn more money, Chi Xiong took on a part-time job as a game server online. My job is to interact with real players and help them earn money in nostalgic web games that use one knife 999 as a gimmick, using an official account. Chi Xiong's game for childcare is called Bloody Battle of Sand City. The content is nothing more than chopping monsters, upgrading bosses, seizing treasures, forming teams, and building trade unions, then competing for server rankings, and together with his brothers, capturing the Sand City. The audience for this type of game is mostly middle-aged people who are wealthy or very wealthy. They used to enjoy playing games when they were young, but they didn't have money to spend money on. Now that they have money, playing these games is not only for nostalgia, but also for almost retaliatory recharging to make up for the shortcomings of not having money to become stronger in the past. The person Chi Xiong met in the game, Guang Xiao, was like this. Although Guang Xiao is called Guang Xiao, he is already a middle-aged man in his 40s. He has been very successful in life, starting from scratch and struggling for more than 20 years. He has become a local building materials enterprise with a market value of over 1 billion yuan. Guang Xiao, although wealthy, is not bold and surprisingly easy-going. Chi Xiong led him through the game to recharge and upgrade, purchase equipment, form a guild, and rank among the top 3 in the entire server. He spent over 100,000 yuan on recharging, allowing Chi Xiong to earn a commission. So much so that Chi Xiong felt a little guilty and couldn't bear to see brother Guang continue to be a financial playboy, so he hinted to him that there weren't many real players in this game, and most of them were actually childcare. As a result, brother Guang Xiao was not surprised at all. He simply said, "I'm getting older, and it's great to have you young people play with me. Your life is not easy either." After this incident, brother Guang Xiao seemed to have gained some closeness and trust in Chi Xiong. He even gave his game account directly to Chi Xiong, asking him to help him play more games and pay him a monthly salary. After all, brother also had to manage company affairs and didn't have much time to play games. The salary given by Guang Xiao is very considerable, and Chi Xiong has been playing with sincerity until now, and his life is no longer so tight. A few days ago, Guang Xiao sent him a very high-end VR device, which was very complete from clothes to helmets. Guang Xiao said that there is a VR version of Battle of Sand, let him also experience it. Chi Xiong really can't figure it out. Why is it necessary to release a VR version of this game? Is it because the special effects and light pollution are not stimulating enough? Having prepared himself mentally to be nauseous by the colorful interface, Chi Xiong put on his equipment, lay in bed, and entered the game. Then it appeared in this desert. The vast desert surging in the heat wave, scorching sunlight, soft sand, the Real Desert is nothing more than that. Chi Xiong stood up from the dust and looked around, shocked beyond measure. How many books would a nostalgic cheat page game take to become like this? I know your audience has a lot of money and little to do, but the money earned shouldn't be spent like this. Is this using the money earned to create an open world? Suddenly, Chi Xiong remembered something and quickly lowered his head to look at his wrist, where there was a screen displaying game data. Yuan Bao. 999, well, it's full, Chi Xiong muttered to himself. Every time brother Kuaishou finishes playing the game on his own, he will top up the currency in the game to prevent Chi Xiong from running out of money and affecting his progress later on. I'm a bit thirsty. Chi Xiong praised the precise and realistic processing of perception in this game. This VR device allows people to enter a semi-sleep state to ensure sufficient immersion, but there is still some perception of the real world. But as soon as this feeling of thirst appeared, it completely drowned out reality, and Chi Xiong could no longer recognize it as a game based on his perception. Coincidentally, let me taste what the game's Cheongjiang Ganlu really tastes like. Qi Xiong operated on the wrist screen, and a jade bottle appeared in his hand out of thin air. 0.1000 ingots, Qi Xiong looked up and drank the liquid from the jade bottle in one gulp. Sweet. So far, he has not realized that what he has entered is not the VR version of Blood Battle Sand City, but Li Fei's civilization simulator. Li Fei looked silly outside the civilization simulator. Since the appearance of this person called Kuaishou, strange words have been constantly popping up from his head. Search for Yuan Bao. 999, he feels thirsty, consumed 1000 yuan, he purchased a bottle of agarose syrup, HP plus 66, physical attack plus 66, magic plus 66, defense plus 66, magic resistance plus 66. What are these things? Li Fei was confused. It seems that this guy, like his attribute of a large amount of money, can balance everything by spending money. The first, power beyond the world, he summoned was actually a Krypton player who enjoyed playing low-quality web games. Okay, since you like to spend money, I'm not polite either. Li Fei first wrote down the previous formula for plants with soil plus rust plus wither tree leaves plus sawdust equals rusty leaves, and then made slight improvements. The previous cause of death of the plant was that it could not carry out photosynthesis. He speculated that it was because of rust and dead leaves, so he simply removed the rust, picked some leaves of the old wutong in the yard, mixed materials again, and threw them into the players. Crazy little. Li Fei stared at the civilization simulator, hoping that the creation of new materials would react to Kuaishou. At first, Kuang Shao was startled by the sudden drop of light and fell to the desert in search of Shuyuan. www.zhaoshuyuan.com. Then new plants grew out of the desert. It is still visible to the naked eye as it takes root and sprouts, growing leaves. This time, the plant has become much more normal, with tender green leaves. Li Fei nodded lightly, at least this time the creation will not die due to the inability to photosynthesis. Words continue to emerge from Kuaishou's head. He found the divine gift. Wutong fairy grass, seedling. It seems that the name of the creation is determined based on the content of the game played by Kuaishou to ensure sufficient attraction for players like him. Attention! The temperature starts to drop, and there is a risk of withering of wutong fairy grass. Li Fei was stunned for a moment, looked up at the sky in the civilization simulator, and found that the sun had already sunk to the edge of the sand dune and was about to set. The climate in the desert is very extreme, very hot during the day and very cold at night. Li Fei's new creation did not consider the design to cope with extreme weather, and may die quickly in low temperatures. However, rather than worrying about the fate of creation, it is more important to worry about the fate of this living person, Kuaishou. He felt cold. The sun quickly set completely, and the civilization simulator fell into darkness, with crazy little accumulating in the sand like a ball. But soon he found a solution. Consuming 10,000 ingots, he ignited the Samadhi bonfire. The death risk of wutong fairy grass, seedling, is reduced, and your creation is growing. Is this the power of money? Watching the small bonfire rising from the desert, a plant and a little person were warming around it. Li Fei smiled. Internal investment has passed. Welcome to invest. Chapter 4. The Birth of Wutong Divine Tree. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Qi Xiong looked around the desert, with only the undulating contours of sand dunes in the heavy night. He lowered his head to look at his task panel, which was also empty. Such a realistic game, such a realistic desert and night, surprisingly empty. There are no NPCs, no beginner tasks, no level panels, and even no small wild monsters that can be used to relieve boredom. Only he, who is alone, and the so-called fairy grass beside him. Is it difficult to become the planner of this game? Will the game that takes on serious tasks, fights monsters, and upgrades be replaced by an art-style experiential game? He also knows some about this type of game. For example, he had played a game before where there was only one tree growing on an empty grassland. Players could do nothing but stare at the big tree and show their teeth. Moreover, this game was too curious and had a high popularity. Although bored, Qi Xiong still wants to experience the unprecedented realism of this game and is not in a hurry to quit. He walked to the side of wutong fairy grass, and when his eyes focused on it, a line of prompts would pop up. Wutong fairy grass. A gift from the gods to the world. This is also the only prompt Qi Xiong has received since entering the game. In the game world, plants grow very fast. Wutong fairy grass is sprouting new shoots at the speed visible to the naked eye. But Qi Xiong thinks it's not growing fast enough. Since there are no tasks in the game, as a player, you should have the awareness to find work for yourself. He opened the game panel, entered the familiar game mall interface, and found the item he wanted. Divine fertilizer. 10,000 yuan per bag. Can only be used on crops or livestock. After use, the growth rate of crops or livestock is multiplied by 100, and the effect lasts for 1 hour. Qi Xiong immediately bought a bag without blinking his eyes. A small burlap bag appeared in his hand out of thin air. This surprised him a bit. On the shopping mall panel, there was a large sack of fertilizer, but he only got the size of a palm. But for such a small grass, it's enough. When he opened the bag, he poured all the fertilizer into the sand around the wutong fairy grass. Proud of the crowd, Kuaishou failed to receive game tasks. Proud of all the heroes, crazy young people checked the wutong fairy grass. Proud of the crowd, spent 10,000 yuan less and purchased 1 divine fertilizer. Proud of all heroes and crazy young people used divine fertilizer *1 on wutong fairy grass, seedlings, growth speed of wutong fairy grass *100. There are constantly text introductions popping up from the top of the player's head, making the godly Fei, who was observing outside, unable to laugh or cry. He thought to himself that the subjective initiative of game players should not be underestimated. During the observation period, Li Fei studied the gameplay of the Civilization Simulator. On the Civilization Simulator panel, text can be input and then distributed to specified objects. So as a deity, he can actually give players reward tasks to drive them to do something. When he was thinking about what task to give to his first player, Guangxiao had already bought a bag of divine fertilizer to use for wutong fairy grass. Wutong fairy grass, which was used as divine fertilizer, began to grow crazily. That growth is simply more exaggerated than the pea in Princess Pea. The tender buds continuously emerge, expand, and become slender leaves. The leaves cluster together to form shrubs, and the branches in the shrubs continue to grow and become branches. The branches become thicker and branch out, and the branches grow higher and higher, continuing to branch out new branches and clusters of tender green leaves. The flowers on the leaves withered quickly, and the green fruits fell into the sand. The new wutong fairy grass spread on the sand, forming a small lawn around it. The posture of crazy little looking at wutong fairy grass changed from looking down to looking up, and he was forced to retreat constantly by the swollen branches, showing an extremely surprised look. Wutong tree, mature. This is the introduction that Li Fei saw after the growth of the divine tree stagnated. At this time, there was already a towering tree in the vast desert of the Civilization Simulator. Calculating proportionally, this tree is actually 50 meters tall. It stands between the desert and the night sky, with vast tree crowns and grasslands under them, forming a sharp contrast with the surrounding barren desert, like a mirage in the desert. But Li Fei soon noticed that the leaves of the wutong tree turned yellow quickly, and even a lot of leaves began to fall. Although the growth of the divine tree has concentrated the water in the desert, and the land under its feet has changed from sand to soil, soon, the poor water in the desert has also been consumed by itself. The wutong tree is short of water. Please supplement it in time. The crazy little man was circling around the divine tree, with constant reminders above his head that he was spending money on props. But now the wutong tree is dozens or hundreds of times bigger than him, and any immortal props are a drop in the bucket. Supplementing with water, Li Fei, who can only serve as a deity, came by himself. He brought his own drinking cup and went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Now he doesn't dare to make any big moves. If he uses the water pump from the courtyard well to directly pour water into it, although the effect may be outstanding, the desert may directly turn into the ocean. Li Fei carefully poured the water from the cup into the transparent interface between the civilization simulator and the real world. Little by little, amazingly, the poured water did not fall directly onto the desert, but spread out in the sky, forming several clouds. Li Fei lowered his head to observe the few clouds. They quickly gathered together, getting more and more, and the color changed from white to iron blue, finally turning into dark gray clouds. A few small currents flowed through the dark clouds, and finally, a clattering sound came out. Below, the dark clouds were accompanied by lightning flashes, and heavy rain fell like opening a break. But the movement of the dark clouds is random, influenced by the airflow in the simulator, and rainwater does not directly fall on the surrounding area of the divine tree. Seeing this scene, Guang Xiao in the simulator became anxious. He was facing the direction of the dark clouds, jumping in haste in the same spot, looking for a book garden. www.zhaozuiyuan.com. A dialog box popped up from the top of his head. Hey, hey, hey. Come over here. You put it there in the rain for chicken feathers. Li Fei was amused by the behavior of the player character inside, and he reached into the simulator, hiding behind the dark clouds and gently flicking. A tingling sensation came from his palm, and lightning hidden in the dark clouds stung him. He dared not stir too hard, because if the dark clouds dispersed, the rain would stop, and in the end, only a few small dark clouds moved around the divine tree. The heavy rain has ended, and the clouds have dispersed. About 10 centimeters away from the divine tree, ratio 1 centimeter equals 1 meter, a shallow water beach with a diameter of about 50 centimeters has appeared. At this moment, the sky was slightly white and the sun was about to come out. The rain only slowed down the rate of withering of the divine tree, but did not completely solve the problem. Now both Li Fei and Guang Xiao in the simulator realized that the water in the shallow beach must be directed to the vicinity of the divine tree as soon as possible. Otherwise, after the sun comes out completely, the desert temperature will rise rapidly, and the shallow beach will be completely evaporated in half a day. Of course, Li Fei can also choose to continue the rainfall, but he cannot control the location of the dark clouds. With a slight error in the ratio between the simulator and reality, the distance between the rain and the divine tree can be separated by a few kilometers. Unless he really wants to rain indiscriminately with a pump, there won't be enough time to revive the divine tree. At present, it can only rely on the shortage of the only player in the simulator. So, Li Fei opened the emulator panel and assigned the first task to Guang Xiao. Divine Mission. Save the wutong tree, task content. Open a water channel to divert the water from the shallow beach to the vicinity of the divine tree, ensuring its sustainable survival in the desert. Task reward. Thanks from the divine tree. Chapter 5. Race Formula. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In fact, when inputting task rewards, Li Fei felt a bit guilty because he didn't have anything to reward the player, so he could only write a hollow and brainless, "Thank you from the divine tree." He didn't know exactly what this gratitude was. Shaking the leaves is also considered gratitude, giving him some fruit to eat is also considered gratitude, becoming a tree spirit writing a thank you letter and sending a banner, that would be great. Anyway, let's draw the cake first. The gratitude of the divine tree. Excitedly reading the first beginner task, Qi Xiong in the game also felt a bit confused. But soon he forgot about the specific content of the reward. Listen, God tree, thank you. In the game, when these two words are combined, the reward will definitely not be bad. That's it, this is all a divine mission. Can the god still deceive me? Qi Xiong opened the game mall and began to unleash his money skills. Spending 50,000 yuan, you have purchased a soul puppet *10, spending 15,000 yuan, you purchased advanced farming tools and hose *10, he only hates that Blood Battle Sandcastle is just a game with a fairy tale background. If there were bulldozers and excavators in the mall after purchasing, 10 illusory human figures appeared around Qi Xiong, which were puppets in Blood Battle Sand City that assisted players in battles and increased damage. They were actually a type of pet follower. When Qi Xiong saw the puppet's flesh and blood blurred body, he was truly startled. What he usually sees on the screen are two-dimensional paper figures, but now these guys appear vividly in front of him. Even the wriggling flesh maggots on his face can be seen clearly, making it difficult for Qi Xiong to look directly at them. "I'll take you back to the mall after I finish my work. It's too scary to keep you here," Qi Xiong muttered to himself. Scaring people back, the puppets, as players' pets, are still very obedient. Qi Xiong distributed hose to them and explained the task content. The 10 puppets obediently ran to the shallow beach in the distance and started digging up the water channel for diversion. The puppets move mechanically and work hard, with hose raised high and falling heavily, carrying out dismembered cultivation on the sandy land. During this period, one puppet accidentally hoed off the head of another puppet and rolled down to the ground, while the headless puppet continued to work hard, startling Qi Xiong on the side. During the water diversion period, Qi Xiong was not idle either. He bought 2 wooden buckets and constantly brought water back from the shallow beach to irrigate the divine tree. He even muttered to the divine tree master, "If you persist for a while, there will be water to drink soon." Finally, before the sun had risen to a high altitude, Qi Xiong led the puppet to complete the irrigation project of the canal, guiding most of the water in the shallow beach to the vicinity of the divine tree, forming a shallow lake next to the divine tree. This not only irrigates the divine tree, but also uses its shade to preserve a portion of the water source. In addition, the root system of the divine tree fixes the water in the sand. If there is continued rainfall in the future, a small area around the divine tree may become an oasis in the desert. Qi Xiong breathed a sigh of relief, retrieved the puppet, wiped his sweat, and sat down leaning against the divine tree. At this moment it was already dawn and the temperature in the desert began to rise again. The distant sand dunes were constantly twisting in the heat wave. He sat under the shade of a tree and casually bought a bottle of agarwood and sweet dew to drink, feeling a refreshing sensation. "It's quite enjoyable." Qi Xiong looked at the shallow lake near his feet, wrinkled by the wind, and felt a sense of accomplishment in his heart. He has been playing boring games of chopping and killing for a long time in order to make a living, and he has not experienced the sense of achievement of cultivating and farming in the game for a long time. Moreover, in this game, both the scene and the experience are so realistic, which greatly enhances his sense of satisfaction. After calming down for a while, he called up the task panel and prepared to claim the task reward. "You have successfully cultivated a canal and saved the endangered divine tree. The divine mission has been completed, and you have received a reward. Thank you from the divine tree due to your extremely high explosive rate characteristic. In addition to regular rewards, you have triggered hidden rewards for tasks, hidden reward. You have gained recognition from the divine tree and become a divine tree lord. After the birth of the divine tree race, you will be worshipped as a lord by them." The divine tree race. Where is it? Qi Xiong looked at the hidden reward with some confusion. He looked up and saw that he was the only one in the vast world, and there was no divine tree race. If they haven't been born yet, when will they be born and how can they be born? Just as Guang Xiao was confused, Li Fei had already burst into laughter. Due to the extremely high explosive rate of Kuaishou, Li Fei also received hidden rewards, which is the creation formula of the divine tree race. Divine tree race creation formula. Boiling water 100 g, iron 0.5 g, salt 10 g, egg white 20 g, carbon 20 grams, 1 gram of silicon, 10 grams of sawdust. After the creator rotates in place 3 times, the mixed material is placed in the civilization simulator to generate a part from the statement that spinning in place 3 times is a bit outrageous and makes Li Fei feel like something is fooling him. Overall, this formula is reasonable. His last creation experiment has proven that the mixing of materials can indeed create living creatures in a civilization simulator, but it is very difficult for creations to survive. Now that there are ready-made formulas, the creations produced are likely to survive more easily than the previous hodgepodge. Li Fei felt it was worth a try, so he began preparing the materials for creation. Not long after Li Fei left, Qi Xiong from the Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com emulator also went offline. Most of the ingredients in the formula are easily found at home, except for iron, silicon, and carbon, which need to be found in the local building materials market. But the building materials market closest to Li Fei's hometown is about 10 kilometers away, so it takes too much time to walk there. He had to borrow an electric bike from his neighbor's house and ride it to the building materials market. This kind of journey is actually the most convenient for driving. Li Fei also has a driver's license. Before, he occasionally helped his leader drive when he was at work, and his basic driving skills were still proficient. Currently, he only needs one car. However, thinking that even cheap commuting cars would cost tens of thousands of yuan, Li Fei suddenly felt that his 1 million yuan was enough to maintain a worry-free life, but buying some large items was still not enough. But it's impossible to work anymore, I'll never work again in my lifetime. Putting aside the idea of making money for now, Li Fei rode his bike and went to the building materials market to collect creative materials. Carbon and silicon are not difficult to find in the building materials market. Pure iron powder costs 15 yuan and 500 grams, activated carbon costs 6 yuan and 1000 grams, and monocrystalline silicon costs 18 yuan and 100 grams. Li Fei bought 5 kilograms each in one go. He rode a small electric bike, carrying 30 pounds of building materials and panting back home. Immediately after, he began preparing other materials. After tidying up, all the materials were ready, and by this time the sky had already darkened. Li Fei turned on the light in the room and began creating things. When he went home, he also bought some experimental equipment such as test tube beakers to facilitate the handling of mixed materials. Boil the water with an alcohol lamp, weigh various materials, and then put them all into a beaker to mix and stir. Li Fei, with a hopeful mood, turned around 3 times and finally poured the materials into the civilization simulator. Chapter 6. Divine Tree Civilization. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The material, through the interface of the civilization simulator, still transformed into several light clusters falling to the ground. However, this time, perhaps due to the guidance of the divine tree, the light cluster turned an angle in mid-air and ultimately landed precisely around the divine tree. Another few centimeters of sand and dust rose up. In the sand and dust, 2 figures indeed appeared. Li Fei looked carefully and saw a pair of things resembling wings behind the figures, but they were very short and only the length of their forearms. The dust slowly dispersed, and Li Fei saw clearly the appearance of these 2 little people. They were a pair of handsome young men and women, who looked no different from ordinary humans overall. The main difference lies in the eyes and behind the back. He zoomed in and saw that the pupils of these 2 teenagers were green, shining with a jade-like luster, with a pair of dark green wings growing behind them. They had just been born, and after looking at each other, they parted ways without any emotional expression in their eyes. This is the beginning of a civilization, and their choices may determine where the entire civilization will go. They kept a distance and paced under the shade of the divine tree, with beautiful wings rising and falling behind them, as if a reflection of inner unease. A gentle breeze blew by, and the crown of the divine tree swayed slightly. The 2 teenagers turned their heads to look at the divine tree at the same time, as if they had been summoned. They walked to the side of the divine tree, half knelt down, leaned their ears against the trunk, as if listening carefully to something. After a moment, they stood up and each took off a feather from their wing. A gust of inexplicable wind blew by, and the feather floated up in the air, breaking down into dark green dots of light and randomly falling towards various places around the divine tree. Subsequently, Li Fei saw the spot where the light had fallen, and one by one, the little people stood up. He counted them, and the two boys each created 6 more little people using their feathers. Now, there are a total of 14 little people around the divine tree. But except for the first 2 teenagers, the other little ones have no wings behind them. 14 little people, led by the first 2 young men, knelt on one knee and lowered their heads towards the divine tree and also towards Li Fei, as if performing some ritual. Timely appearance of text. As a god, you completed the creation of Creator 002. Wutong Divine Tree, and Wutong Divine Tree gave birth to the Divine Tree civilization according to your will. Starting from listening to the oracle conveyed by the tree, the civilization of the tree gave birth to its initial life. The wise among them grow beautiful wings, but cannot touch the sky. They inhabit between tree branches and water, and are skilled in utilizing and creating things belonging to the sky and water bodies. They believe in a great deity named Fei and identify with arrogant and arrogant few, as lords who help them communicate with the god. Seeing that his name had become a deity in front of him, Li Fei could barely hold back, while he couldn't hold back when the player's name came out. I hope the player IDs that come in later can be more normal. After the introduction of the Divine Tree civilization ended, the ceremony of the 14 little people of the Divine Tree civilization also came to an end. Under the command of the first 2 teenagers, they began to get busy. The little people born around the Divine Tree climb up and pick the fruits from it. The little people born next to the canal and shallow beach began to pick up branches and thatch, expand the canal, and collect sediment from the bottom of the water. 2 teenagers also joined in and started working. The mysterious and elegant ceremony just now seems to be just an illusory dream, and the beginning of civilization is often tiring and disheveled, and full of danger. Li Fei discovered that after the birth of the Divine Tree civilization, everything in the simulator began to display levels. Firstly, the panel displays information about the current civilization. LV1 Primitive Civilization. At the beginning of civilization's birth, it was very fragile and needed protection from lords and gods. Population 14. Then every character in the simulator has a clan and name. For example, the first 2 teenagers both had their own names. The man was named He Lang, and the clan was the He clan. The little people he created were all in this clan. The woman is called the Wind Woman, and the clan is the Wind Clan. The little people she creates naturally belong to this clan. And when Li Fei focuses his attention on He Lang or Feng Nu, a unique attribute panel will appear, such as He Lang's panel. Wise Man, He Lang, LV5, 2/100, features. Creating inventions. The panel that Li Fei saw when Kuaishou entered the simulator was the same, but at that time the panel did not display the level of Kuaishou. He speculates that those with panels are generally special individuals in civilization. Li Fei enthusiastically observed the activities of small people in the simulator for a long time, and as time progressed, their behavior became increasingly close to the state of primitive human civilization. Women are responsible for collecting wild fruits from the divine tree, and the huge canopy of the divine tree hides a large number of green fruits, seemingly prepared for the initial survival of this small group. As for improving food through fire and cooking at present, no one in the Shinshu civilization has been able to master this technology. Li Fei believes that this is because there is no meat available for cooking in the desert. Not even other types of creatures. This gave Li Fei a headache. After all, he couldn't capture real creatures and put them inside. Because even an ant in a simulator is a giant beast that can destroy the entire civilization. Without animals, there would be no hunting activities, so in the Divine Tree civilization, the main responsibility of men is currently to build houses. In this matter, Li Fei truly realized the fragility of the early stages of civilization development. Seeking shelter from wind and rain may be an instinct engraved in the genes of intelligent organisms. Due to the flat terrain and loose soil of the desert, they lost the conditions for developing cave civilization. Zhaoshuyuan.com. So the men of the Shinshu tribe instinctively wanted to create a place enclosed by walls and roofs. But they have an innate understanding of the concept of houses, but they have not understood the structure of houses. During the long hours, Li Fei saw the men of the Divine Tree clan working in groups day and night to build various bizarre buildings. Someone used the silt from the bottom of the river to pile up walls bit by bit, but before the silt could dry and solidify, it collapsed crookedly. There are also those built directly from dead tree branches and thatch. Although this construction method may seem simple and economical, young people have no concept of structure in their minds. The branches are stacked together in various ways countless times, but none of them have been successful. Later, Li Fei saw that the male sage, He Lang, organized everyone together and said, "The silt at the bottom of the river can fix the branches on the foundation, but we need thicker branches." The wise man is right. Everyone suddenly realized, cheered for a while, and then continued to build a new thatched hut with enthusiasm. This time, He Lang did not join in, but instead went towards the direction of the divine tree. The female wise woman, Fengnu, saw him and lightly jumped down from the tree, like a peacock flying down the mountain slope. "Perhaps we need the branches of the divine tree to build sturdy houses," said He Lang to her. "Will this desecrate the gods?" "He Lang, our survival is more important," replied Fengnu, her emerald-like bright eyes filled with determination. "Let me break off the branches and bear the punishment of the gods." Li Fei was somewhat surprised when Fengnu's panel appeared. Wise Man, Wind Woman, LV 5, 50/100, feature. Courage. Chapter 7. Gold Coins Burst. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the ritual where all the members of the tribe knelt half down towards the divine tree, Fengnu jumped onto the tree and used the stone axe invented by He Lang to cut off 14 thick branches of the tree. Under the command of He Lang, the male ethnic group simply processed the branches into straight pillars, inserted them into the foundation shaped by the river mud, and tied small tree branches onto the pillars to form walls and roof trusses. Finally, thatch was laid on the pillars, and the first building of the divine tree civilization was completed. The same building was quickly replicated and 4 were built, so the God Tree clan no longer had to worry about wind, rain, and sun. The divine tree civilization has mastered the construction technology of thatched houses, obtaining 5 entropy energy points. While Li Fei was delighted by the development of civilization in the simulator, the panel displayed that he had obtained new entropy energy. He clicked on the prompt to obtain entropy energy, and a text introduction popped up. The development of civilization leads to the consumption of divine creations, and this portion of entropy energy will be returned to the gods. The more civilization develops, the more entropy energy will be returned. The entropy energy obtained from the development of civilization is much higher than that obtained from the extinction of creation. Just by clicking on the most basic technological point, Li Fei was actually able to return 5 points of entropy energy. At this point, an additional option appeared on the panel of the civilization simulator. Entropy energy exchange. Click on this option. There are many sub-options below, but most of them are blurry, and only 2 can be seen clearly, namely, gold, and summon. Li Fei tried to click summoning and a dialog box popped up. The current level of civilization development does not support continuing to summon. Originally, there were limitations on the level of civilization development when summoning. On second thought, Li Fei also thought it was reasonable. After all, with the current scale of civilization, 1 player as a lord is enough. So he had to click on the gold coin next to him, and since there were new options, he still wanted to give it a try. After clicking on it, the number of entropy energy points changed to 4. Why hasn't there been any change? Li Fei was very confused, thinking to himself that he wouldn't be fooled. But soon he felt a cold and icy palm, as if he was holding something. Spread out your palm, a sparkling gold coin quietly lies in the palm of your hand. Ah, this, doing magic. Li Fei first checked the coins and confirmed that they were not chocolate. Then he gently bit them in his mouth and didn't feel anything. Isn't it just a simple and straightforward exchange of entropy energy for a real gold coin? Li Fei decided to go out tomorrow to find a gold shop for appraisal. If it were real gold coins, he could get rich by relying on the civilization simulator. I yawned and felt drowsy. Due to being too addicted to the civilization simulator, Li Fei realized that it was already 2 o'clock in the morning and he even forgot to eat dinner. He scaled down the civilization simulator a bit, placed it on the desktop, and then went for a quick wash before lying in bed and sleeping. When Li Fei woke up the next day, he unexpectedly felt refreshed and full of energy. He thought to himself that he should have slept for a long time, but when he looked at the time, it was only 6 o'clock. I only slept for 4 hours, how can I feel like I've slept for 8 hours? He couldn't help but recall his previous days at work. The later he worked overtime, the longer he stayed up late to play with his phone at night. He slept at 2 or 3 in the evening and got up at 8 the next day to catch the subway. He often lived half dead and was very tired, always worried that he would suddenly die the next second, forming a sharp contrast with his current self. Is it the role of a civilization simulator? Li Fei picked up the simulator from the desktop, enlarged it to a size of 1 meter square, and continued to observe. During the time when he was asleep, the arrogant few did not go online, and civilization was still developing freely. There are several thatched cottages around the divine tree and by the shallow water beach, and a few more children among the little ones. When Li Fei looked at the civilized population, it increased from 14 to 16. Okay, I secretly gave birth while the deity was asleep. The most obvious change is that the crown of the wutong tree is sparse, and probably the fruit on it has been almost picked, and even some branches have been cut down to build houses. There's no way, the conditions in the desert are too harsh, they can only pull up this big tree. Li Fei found that Feng Nu had begun to lead women to use fruits to plant new wutong fairies. However, unless there is an urgent need for players to use divine fertilizer, with the supply of wutong fairies, the ethnic group will soon face a food crisis. Li Fei wanted to mix some random materials and create some wild beasts to feed them, but he was also worried about creating something too wild. How about feeding real food directly? Quickly, Li Fei rejected this idea again. The ingredients of modern food are so complex that throwing them into it may automatically synthesize something very wild. I can only trust the players' wisdom. But the players are still not online for a long time. Sitting there observing for another hour, Li Fei also brought them some rain and increased their freshwater reserves. After confirming that the food crisis would not erupt soon, he finally left the door. After going out for breakfast, Li Fei borrowed his neighbor's little electric donkey and headed straight to Jindian in the county town. Today he is going to verify whether that gold coin is real gold or not. The gold shop he is going to is a local branch of a large jewelry company, with a considerable scale. When Li Fei was a child, he and his parents went to identify gold jewelry. There was a specialized non-destructive gold identification equipment inside, and the identification results could be obtained on the same day. While waiting for the appraisal results at Jindian, he stared at the LED screen scrolling on the wall, which read: Today's gold price. 478.50 yuan per gram. I secretly calculated to myself, looking for Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com. If that gold coin is full gold, how much is it equivalent to? Finally, the clerk walked over to the counter with a professional smile and told Li Fei, "Sir, we have preliminarily identified your gold coin as pure gold. We can recover this gold coin at the current price, but if you need an identification certificate, we are not qualified to issue it." Look. Li Fei was overjoyed when he heard of pure gold. He specifically checked and found that pure gold refers to gold with a gold content of over 99.6%, and is also the highest quality gold. Unexpectedly, the entropy energy points were exchanged for genuine goods. He suppressed the raised corners of his mouth and put on a calm expression that he had known for a long time, asking the clerk, "How many grams does this gold coin weigh?" The salesperson replied, "Your gold coin weighs 25 grams, and the recycling price is approximately 11,962 yuan per coin. Recycling, Li Fei said without hesitation. 1 point of entropy energy is equivalent to 12,000 yuan. Currently, there are still 4 points of entropy energy stored in the simulator. If all of them are converted into coins, it would be 60,000 yuan. In the visible future, more entropy energy will be generated. Li Fei felt that he was not far from true wealth, freedom and rural life. By the time he got home, it was already noon. Li Fei simply scrambled an egg, dealt with his lunch with Mantu, sat in front of the civilization simulator, and continued to promote the development of Shinshu civilization. Since he had the civilization simulator, his waist has stopped getting sore, his legs have stopped hurting, his energy has become more vigorous, and he has also increased the amount of money in his account. This made him have to take the civilization in the simulator more seriously. When he saw the scene inside the simulator again, Player+Creation had just launched. Chapter 8. This lord is a model worker. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Has the game been updated? Qi Xiong entered the game again and saw the data panel in front of him. ID, proud of the heroes and crazy young, lord of the Divine Tree Clan, clan trust value. 1 out of 100, indifferent, level. LV 15, 0/200, life. 1500/1500, power. 5, speed. 5, wealth. 0, assignable attribute. 0, features. Large amount of money, fixed damage, ultra-high burst rate. Upon seeing this panel, Qi Xiong realized that the game had its own level and numerical value, but the numerical types were relatively simple, with only 4 dimensions. Strength, speed, life, and wealth. Wait a minute. Wealth. Is wealth also considered an attribute? Can we add some more? Qi Xiong felt it was strange. He had played so many games, and for the first time, he saw that wealth could be increased. Most games were made directly, and relying on the added value was not enough to spend. And his current wealth value is actually 0. He quickly clicked on the game mall and saw the 7-digit ingots inside, which relieved him. If so many ingots were lost due to game updates, he wouldn't be able to afford it. Ding! Suddenly, a voice rang out in Qi Xiong's mind, and the panel in front of him changed. Normal task. Lord's responsibilities, one of which, task content. Make the Divine Tree Clan members aware of your existence as a lord. Task rewards. 1 assignable attribute point, 5 clan trust points, and 50 experience points. Qi Xiong smiled knowingly when he saw that the game had issued a new task, thinking that after the game update, there would finally be some games to play. He no longer had to wander around in the game world like a headless fly before. And he started this game as the Lord, so it was a smooth sailing game. So he walked out from the birthplace behind the divine tree and saw a scene that surprised him. Many people. The development of the Divine Tree Clan had already begun to take shape at this time, leaving traces of life on this desert oasis centered around the Divine Tree. Under the shadow of the Divine Tree, the newly planted wutong fairy grass of the Divine Tree tribe grew very luxuriantly, extending more than 10 meters beyond the original desert interior. Moreover, as the creation of the gods, wutong fairy grass seems to have the ability to differentiate different kinds of plants. All kinds of plants grow on the fairy grass, some are clusters of shrubs, some grow into small trees, and bear fruits of different shapes. The women of the Wind Clan of the Divine Tree Clan pick and pick during this time. Although, according to the inference of the deity Li Fei, the food crisis of the Divine Tree Clan still exists, at least they have passed the stage where they can only eat the fruits of the Divine Tree. The shallow water beach formed by the rain has now become a true lake, and the lake water has changed from a previously turbid yellow to a jade-like emerald green. This should be the result of the proliferation of algae and plants differentiated from the fairy grass in the lake water. Qi Xiong saw its name marked on the lake water. Oasis Lake. The people of the Shinshu tribe named their lake. The oasis lake has changed from a circular shape to a crescent-shaped one, just wrapping around the Shinshu oasis. On the basis of the water diversion channel originally excavated by Qi Xiong, the Shinshu tribe has expanded and excavated again. The people of the Shinshu tribe seem to love water very much. The river stretches out like a spider web on the oasis, with more than a dozen wooden thatched houses scattered among them. People work, play, and rest along the river and lake, creating a peaceful scene. The huge canopy of the divine tree protects the entire civilization from the invasion of wind and sand, making the oasis inside and outside seem like two worlds. In a different world. Qi Xiong muttered to himself. If he only saw this scene on the computer screen, he wouldn't be very surprised. After all, he knew it was just an image. After fading out the colors and shadows, everything here was a gray-white model built by the modeler, lifeless. But when he is in such a realistic game with all five senses, it is even difficult for him to believe that this is not reality, and everything here is not a great creation accumulated bit by a resilient civilization at the beginning of its development. There is no mold between people and objects here, and the scene is not lagging. People can hold hands and embrace each other. When children play in the water, it will cause splashes and ripples. Men who expand the river channel will splash mud on their calves. Last time Qi Xiong was online, there was only a lonely tree and desert in this world. He could only understand the reality of the picture, but he did not realize the vividness of the world. And when these living people appeared and interacted with all things in the world, he first understood the vividness of this world. Vivid like another real world, not a game. At this moment, a beautiful woman walked towards Qi Xiong, her steps as light as a deer, with dark green wings on her back. Their clothes made of grass only covered the important parts, and their long white legs were exposed outside. They gently lit the grass and the river, and walked over, shaking Qi Xiong a little panic. Calm, just an NPC, Qi Xiong hinted to himself. He looked at the woman and a string of words appeared beside her. Wise man, wind woman, level. LV6, 10/100, feature. Courage, Feng Nu gently bowed to him, and he also learned to bow back. Lord of communication with the gods, welcome your arrival. The voice of the wind girl was clear and ethereal like a wind bell. As Feng Nu spoke, Qi Xiong saw several clan members standing behind her and bowing to him, but only a few. More people were still busy with their own affairs and ignored their lords. Clan trust value. 1 out of 100, indifferent. Qi Xiong saw the trust value of this tribe member and almost understood it. Although he is a lord, he still needs to gain trust and earn the respect of his tribe through some means. Sure enough, after the diplomatic ceremony, Feng Nu left without looking back, leaving only a beautiful silhouette for Qi Xiong. You're really indifferent, Qi Xiong muttered. Ding! The familiar voice rang out again. The ordinary task, Lord's responsibilities, 1, has been completed. Obtain rewards, 1 distributable attribute point *1, 5 clan trust points *5, experience *50, the first task was completed quite easily. Say hello to the NPC and have a conversation with Shuyuan www.zhaoshuyuan.com, and it's over. Just as Qi Xiong was waiting for the second task in confusion, accompanied by a ding sound, a voice came from afar. Help me. Lord. A barefoot girl stood next to the tent house, waving at him. Proud of the crowd, Kuaishou helped Feng Huo repair the house, and the trust value of the clan members +2, proud of the crowd, Kuaishou helped the river bear. The river lion excavated the river channel, and the trust value of the tribe members was +4, proud of the crowd, Kuaishou helped Fengji carry water, irrigated Xianchao, and gained 2 trust points from the clan members. This is not a lord, this is a model worker. Beside the civilization simulator, Li Fei looked at the text floating out of Kuang Shao's head and exclaimed in admiration. Although they may not work actively in reality, once they enter the game and receive timely positive feedback, players will be very hardworking. After a while, Guang Xiao achieved the 8th level of the ordinary task assigned by the civilization simulator, the Lord's responsibilities. If we continue at this speed, Li Fei will not be particularly surprised if there are 180.8 tasks in the future. After the emergence of civilization, the civilization simulator will automatically generate ordinary tasks for players to ensure that they are not idle and continue to contribute to the development of civilization. But as a deity, Li Fei can guide the progress of civilization by assigning divine missions to the lords. After observing for a while, he had already figured out what divine task to assign to Guang Xiao. He focused his gaze on the edge of the oasis, by the edge of the oasis lake, and his vision was enlarged. There was a young man silently grinding stones. His name is River Blade, and according to the time in the simulator, he has been there for 15 days and nights. Since the last time he returned from diving. Chapter 9. New species in the lake. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Despite being shaded by divine trees, Oasis Lake is located at the outermost edge of the oasis and is still affected by the extreme climate of the desert day and night. At the beginning of the formation of the Oasis Lake, it actually evaporated under the scorching sun, which is why its lake surface changed from a circular shape to a crescent shape. If it weren't for Li Fei's continuous rainfall replenishment in the future, Oasis Lake might have turned into a quagmire now, and the God Tree clan, which had lost its water source, would gradually perish. But Li Fei soon discovered that even if there was no precipitation for a period of time, the water level of the Oasis Lake would not change again. This is a strange phenomenon, indicating that besides rainwater, something has been supplying water to the Oasis Lake. There is no other river water flowing into the lake on the surface, so Li Fei can only conclude that the water source for supplying the Oasis Lake is underground. Is there a hidden river below the desert? With this question in mind, Li Fei carefully examined every corner of the Oasis Lake and never gained much. Until he discovered the River Blade. River Blade was one of the first 14 people of the Divine Tree clan, but the youngest among them. He was born on the edge of an oasis, by the shore of an oasis lake, far away from 13 other people, which seemed to hastily determine his solitary and independent personality. When the whole clan was digging waterways, building houses, and picking fruits, he lacked enthusiasm. If the leader He Lang did not supervise him, he would not actively participate in these activities. This also resulted in him not getting enough food and becoming thin and short. He didn't have his own house, but instead made a wooden raft out of wood and thatch. At night, he sat on the raft floating on the lake, swaying by the wind and slowly falling asleep. River Blade invented wooden rafts, becoming the starting point of this civilization's invention of ships. This added 5 points of entropy energy to Li Fei, and it was at this moment that he noticed the lonely drifting youth of River Blade. Also, due to the invention of wooden rafts, River Blade had its own panel. River Blade, level. LV2, 1/100, characteristic. Water-based, from then on, the lake became the spiritual home of the River Blade. He was no longer satisfied with drifting on the lake, but directly jumped into the lake to swim, even diving into the water for a long time without coming out. He moves freely in the lake, floating and diving, his thin and smooth body reflecting sunlight, making him more like an agile swimming fish. Although this civilization has not yet seen a real fish. At this moment, like falling in love with the ups and downs of the waves in the lake, a girl from the Wind clan named Feng Hua fell in love with the River Blade. The appearance of Feng Hua solved the problem of eating for River Blade. Whenever he dived into the water hungry, Feng Hua would secretly put 2 or 3 divine tree fruits on the shore and then hurriedly leave. But every time the River Blade quickly swam to the shore, picked up a divine tree fruit and took a bite, then stared at the back of Feng Hua in a daze. He wanted to repay Feng Hua and respond to her love, but he had nothing but the water of Oasis Lake. With the development of civilization, a monogamous spouse system was formed within the Shinshu tribe. It's amazing, this doesn't correspond to the reality of primitive human society. Li Fei can only absurdly speculate that this is the anti-crab system of the civilization simulator. In the Shinshu tribe, men and women develop love and need to exchange something to establish a relationship. Currently, the means of production of the Shinshu tribe are relatively limited. Generally, women collect food or other materials specifically for men, while men build houses for women and find ways to improve their living standards to continue their offspring. There are divine tree fruits and branches on the divine tree, grass and rivers on the ground, but there is nothing in the lake water, and there is nothing on the river edge to give to the wind flower. Until Li Fei discovered that the river blade began to dive non-stop, and each time he went ashore, his level experience would increase by more than 10 or even dozens of points. In a few days and nights, the river blade rose to LV5. After his last dive, Li Fei received a prompt from the civilization simulator. A new species has been discovered in the river tribe and river blade. Li Fei quickly zoomed in and found that river blade was sitting by the riverbank panting heavily, with a look of being startled and uncertain. There is a considerable wound on river blade's arm, with uneven edges that seem to have been torn apart by sharp objects. Feng Hua saw that the river blade was injured, disregarding his shyness, and ran to his side with a few leaves of the divine tree. Kneeling down to bandage his arm, Li Fei saw a plump red fish on the edge of the river blade's legs, with a protruding mouth and a row of small saw-like teeth exposed. This fish of unknown origin is not long in length, only slightly longer than the palm of the river blade, but it is exceptionally obese, presenting a round oval shape overall, which is on par with the enraged pufferfish. "What is this?" Feng Hua asked River Blade. River Blade didn't speak. Under Li Fei's careful observation, River Blade never diving again since that day. He returned to the shore and didn't even sleep on the raft at night. In recent days, River Blade has found various types of stones by the river, imitating others in making stone axes and hoes, polishing large stones day and night. He became even more silent than before. Even late at night, he would suddenly wake up from his sleep and stare at the calm lake for a long, long time. He no longer responded to Feng Hua's love and became like a stone by the lake. Feng Hua came to see him fewer and fewer times, and in the end, he simply stopped coming to the lake. River Blade remained indifferent to these, still diligently grinding sharp stones, embedding them into wooden sticks, combining them into weapons and placing them anywhere on the riverbank he could reach at any time. Li Fei felt that this guy was very abnormal. The things he made were not useful for hoeing or digging waterways, they were just simple weapons. However, for the Divine Tree clan, due to the lack of other species, the term enemy has not yet appeared, let alone weapons. They have no awareness of manufacturing weapons to defend themselves. But the River Blade suddenly realized this concept. Is it because of that fat fish? That fish has been left unattended by the shore, and it has not yet become a food in the concept of the Divine Tree clan. Li Fei felt that it was unreasonable for the River Blade to be scared by a small fish. He had been diving underwater for a long time that day and was very scared when he came out. There must be something that scared him very much below the lake surface. Perhaps this thing has a strong correlation with the long-term existence of oasis lakes. So Li Fei assigned the Lord Kuang Shao a divine mission. Divine mission, Heart of River Blade, task description. A boy named He Jian by the river seems to have some worries after diving. Try to get along with him in a friendly way, find out where his troubles lie, and solve them properly. Task tip. If necessary, dive into the water and take a look. Remember to bring your weapons. Task rewards. 10 assignable attribute points, 500 experience points, and 10 clan trust points. Chapter 10. Hearts of River Blade. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The ordinary task Lord's Responsibilities, it's 21, has been completed. ID, Proud of the Heroes and Crazy Young, Lord of the Divine Tree Clan, Clan Trust Value. 15 out of 100, Slightly Heard, Level. LV 15, 135/200, assignable attributes. 5. Qi Xiong smiled and looked at the changes in his panel, expressing great satisfaction. Although these 20.1 ordinary tasks are mostly to help the people of the Divine Tree clan complete some daily trivialities, which is not in line with his status as a lord, he has a considerable sense of achievement. Last time, after digging a river in the game and working hard, Qi Xiong thought that his body would be exhausted after going offline, and he might not even be able to work the next day. But as soon as he went offline and opened his eyes, he felt very relaxed all over, just like waking up naturally after working overtime and staying up late. He didn't even know if it was an illusion, and he felt that the muscles on his arms had strengthened a bit. The fatigue in the game is very real, but after going offline, the fatigue will dissipate. On the contrary, the physical intensity exercise in the game seems to have been retained, so playing the game even has the effect of strengthening the body. So after this launch, Qi Xiong did not avoid such physically demanding work at all. After all, in reality, he doesn't have much time to exercise for the sake of living, and his body has gradually developed many minor problems. Although I don't know the principle, it would be great if I could exercise in the game and restore my body to its optimal state. Moreover, as long as he works hard in the game, his strength will increase. What else can he expect? Ding! The divine mission, River Blade's Mind, has been released. Assignable attribute points *10, experience *500, clan trust value *10. After reading the task reward, Qi Xiong's mood gradually became excited. Such a generous reward, even if you stay up late today, you still have to take this task. According to the positioning of the game, he quickly found River Blade. In Qi Xiong's view, the River Blade was grinding stones by the river, with a yellow exclamation mark on its head. He walked up to the edge of the river. The conversation was not triggered. It seems that it needs to be triggered actively, Qi Xiong thought to himself. So he hesitated for a moment and then said abruptly, "Hello." River Blade was still grinding his knife on his own, ignoring him and not even realizing that their lord had arrived by his side. This lord is really embarrassing. After all, his current level of trust is only slightly heard of, and this young man is grinding his knife alone on the edge of the oasis. It's normal not to know him. But in a normal online game, if a player clicks on an NPC, it should trigger a conversation, but River Blade stands with an exclamation mark and does not intend to hand over the task to Qi Xiong, making him very embarrassed. After pacing around this NPC and looking up and down at the River Blade, Qi Xiong finally placed the breakthrough on the stone he was grinding. He observed that in addition to the semi-finished products being ground on his hand, he also had several finished products that had already been ground on hand. The agricultural tools manufactured by other members of the Shinshu tribe are generally rough in workmanship and not sharp, as they currently do not use particularly sharp tools in their production. But the tools used in these finished products, such as the River Blade, are specially made of stones with appropriate thickness and finely crafted, and their sharpness has almost reached the limit of current productivity levels. Holding such a weapon can almost kill people, which makes one wonder why this guy is making these things. This River Blade is not simple. Qi Xiong felt that the River Blade could break through the constraints of ideas and invent these stone-polished weapons, which was simply a genius. However, precisely because of this, Qi Xiong also had a way to break the silence. He opened the game mall as usual, ready to unleash his cash abilities. You purchased a regular dagger for 500 yuan. A modern craftsmanship dagger appeared in Qi Xiong's hand, and when he compared it with those stone tools, the exquisite and sharp tools that he had originally looked at immediately paled. Qi Xiong removed the handle of the dagger and only took out the blade, placing it in front of the River Blade. The wheezing of the knife suddenly came to an end. River Blade's gaze fell on the blade, his eyes blinking without blinking, and his expression showed doubt. Doubts, as expected by Qi Xiong. Because this dagger blade, as an iron product, surpasses the current understanding of the Divine Tree civilization by too much. This civilization is still in the early stages of the Stone Age, and even bronze-like metal minerals have not been discovered or used. The first time iron products were seen, it was almost as incomprehensible as humans seeing superluminal spacecraft. Qi Xiong had done the same thing before when doing tasks, buying high-tech or even magical items from the game mall and giving them to the Shinshu clan people to use, attempting to forcibly elevate their civilization level in this way. For example, using fertilizers to ripen crops, using iron hose to plow the soil, and even using puppets to help with work. The result was a failure in all the strange reactions of the tribe, especially the use of puppets to help. The puppet was fiercely attacked by the tribe, and Qi Xiong's trust as the lord plummeted. If it weren't for his quick action to retrieve the puppet, his lord position would probably not have been preserved. Everything starts from reality, it's the same everywhere. As a player with modern ideas and knowledge, you can only guide the development of civilization and cannot push things forward too quickly. The river blade pulled out several pieces of grass from the ground, stacked them together and placed them on a stone. It picked up a dagger blade and gently cut them, and found the Shuyuan website www.zhaoshuyuan.com to neatly cut off several pieces of grass. This was a common phenomenon in Qi Xiong's eyes, but Ren was surprised. He carefully rubbed the blade, and suddenly a light appeared in his hesitant and dim pupils. Qi Xiong felt that he had already touched the river blade, and he was just one step away from the door. "Do you like it?" "I gave it to you," Qi Xiong said to He Jian. The young man suddenly looked up at him, and his face, which had become somewhat dark due to the wind and sun, burst into a rare smile. "Thank you," he said. This may be the first time in his life that he has said thank you to someone. He found a long wooden stick, and the bark on it had already been peeled off by him. The whole stick was polished straight and smooth, very convenient. Then he skillfully tied the blade tightly to one end of the wooden stick using his own woven grass rope. He took this new weapon and stabbed it into the water a few times, with an excited smile on his face. Clan Trust Value 17 out of 100, slightly heard, Qi Xiong discovered that his trust value had unconsciously increased by 2 points. But the divine mission did not show completion, and he still wanted to ask why River Blade was so persistent in manufacturing weapons, even though no natural enemies had yet appeared in this civilization. "Can you tell me why you make these things?" Qi Xiong asked directly. Still hesitating for a moment while playing with the new weapon, then looking at Qi Xiong. Qi Xiong noticed that his gaze had become very firm. He walked forward step by step, picked up the weapon in his hand, and fiercely plunged it into the grass at Qi Xiong's feet. The blade pierced the strange fish. River Blade looked at the corpse of the strange fish on the ground and said word by word. "There are monsters in the lake, I want to protect everyone."